But joining us now is James Clapper. He served as the Director of National Intelligence for 7 years under President Obama and is now a CNN national security analyst. Director Clapper, it is so good to have you here during this breaking news because Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, some of their most active years were 2010 through 2017 when you were Director of National Intelligence. What do you think as you watch the arrest today at the behest of the United States?
Well, I was, of course, recalling the 2010 era was right as I had started as DNI and had to deal with the impact of the Chelsea Manning revelations, which are quite damaging, and it caused us all kinds of grief in the intelligence community. I do think that Jeffrey Toobin, I think, as always, articulated the complexities of this case, and there is the freedom of the press aspect. I personally, and this is a personal opinion, not a legal opinion, think I'm in my Pompeo school that WikiLeaks is really a non-nation state hostile intelligence service. But I'm saying that as an intel guy and having lived through the grief that those revelations caused. There is the comparison between WikiLeaks and the likes of, say, the New York Times or the Washington Post. That's what WikiLeaks is making. I mean, they want to make that comparison. I recognize that. I will just point out one subtle difference from a practical standpoint is that when the New York Times, the likes of the New York Times or the Washington Post or any of the responsible media came into possession of classified material, typically, not always, but typically, they would at least give us, the intelligence community, the opportunity to comment and make the case for not publishing something. Now, I will say also that, though, that their definition of what is harmful to national security and my definition of what's harmful to national security were not exactly congruent.
Look, these are conversations.
The important difference here, Allison, is that at least we had the opportunity to make our case. And if someone's life was potentially at risk, responsible media would not publish that. Yes, these are hard conversations that are had in newsrooms around the country and the world all the time. But I'm curious, obviously all of us are curious to see when this is unsealed, and we expect it to happen moments from now, what the charges are against Julian Assange. And it sounds like, if you believe his editor, we spoke to the WikiLeaks editor a few minutes ago, that it's about the 2010 publication and revelations, that it's not about 2016. But of course, so much has changed since 2010 here in this country. And you'll remember that President Trump said, I love WikiLeaks. He encouraged WikiLeaks. He hoped that WikiLeaks would publish more from the DNC hack. He was quite sympathetic to WikiLeaks and a fan of WikiLeaks. And so what does that mean now for the court case back here at home, now that President Trump is sympathetic to them? Well, you're right to point out what's changed since 2010, and I don't know. And in fact, it makes the arrest at our behest, apparently, even more curious. And obviously, if there's a court proceeding here, undoubtedly, Assange's attorneys are going to point that out. That the President of the United States, as a candidate, heaped praise on WikiLeaks. So I'm not an attorney. I don't know how that's going to complicate the legal case that the United States government would now make against Assange. All right, we need you on standby because obviously we are waiting for those charges to be unsealed. We believe at any moment now, and so obviously I'll go back to that when that happens. In the meantime, I wanted to ask you about what we saw yesterday from the Attorney General, Bill Barr, in front of the Senate. You called it stunning and scary, those are your words, that Barr would use the word spying. So can you tell me what was scary about that to you? Well, spying has a term I've never liked. I never liked that term being applied to me, even though I spent 50 years in the intelligence business. It has a bad connotation. It's a pejorative term. It smacks of illegality, lack of oversight, all those kind of things. And that wasn't the case here. My concern in all this, as it was when I served as DNI, was the Russians and what the Russians were doing. And to the extent that there was surveillance of anyone, it was occasioned by contacts with Russians who are targets, validated foreign intelligence targets. And we sort of lost sight of that and the threat that the Russians posed, because that's how this all started, is the Russian meddling. So when the Attorney General, and I believe he used that term deliberately, you know, he's been the Attorney General before, so he's not unfamiliar with all this. I thought it was quite stunning. Yeah. And apparently his concern is more broadly to the intelligence community at large, not just the FBI. So I'm very interested to know what it is that gives him concern. Yeah, he was unclear. He did not expound on what gave him concern. It sounded like he was open to being concerned, and he was going to wait to hear what the Inspector General had to say. But I want to talk about how what you hear Republicans saying and the president is that they should have alerted, if there was an investigation, a counterintelligence investigation that involved the Trump campaign, they should have alerted the Trump campaign. Now, you were the person who in January of 2017, one of the people, went to tell the then president-elect that all of this was swirling around, and he had already been alerted that Russians were trying to interfere in the campaign. And so should the campaign have known before that date that you went over there that there was an possibly a counterintelligence investigation involving some people connected to the campaign? Well, I can't speak specifically, Allison, to what the FBI did. I believe, but I don't know for sure, but I believe they did give kind of standard defensive briefings after the candidates were designated after their respective conventions. When the two candidates emerged, we started, as is customary, intelligence briefings for both candidates. But should it have gone? Those intelligence briefings included reporting on the Russian meddling that was ongoing. Yeah. So when you hear different Republican lawmakers say, how dare they not alert the campaign that there was this counterintelligence investigation, are they right or wrong? Well, I don't know what the decision calculus here was by the FBI contemporaneously, but I do know as a general rule, particularly with respect to a counterintelligence investigation, that when you start it, you want to be sure who is potentially complicit and who isn't. And there's, as a general rule of thumb, you try to be as cloistered and compartmented about such investigations for all kinds of good reasons. So again, I don't know what the decision calculus was at the time contemporaneously that the FBI used. It's my understanding they did give general counterintelligence briefings, specifically focused, I believe, on the Russians. Yeah, it's good to get that context. Director James Clapper, keep your phone handy. We'll have you on speed dial as all of this unfolds. Thank you very much.